And the first big thing after night one of the 25-26 college basketball season is the statement that was made by Tommy Lloyd in Arizona, going to Las Vegas and defeating the defending national champion Florida Gators. Now, the story of this game, obviously, is the play of freshman forward Koa Peat, who dropped the 30 spot on the Gators in his first ever college game. One of the narratives we are hearing time and time again is obviously about the great freshmen that there are this season in college basketball. AJ Dybantsa, who we'll get to in a couple of minutes. Darren Peterson at Kansas, who we'll get to obviously later on as well. And obviously Cam Boozer, who tonight will lead Duke against Texas and Charlotte. Koa Peat wasn't mentioned in that conversation until yesterday. And I was in Tucson during the preseason, and I took in a practice. And the million-dollar question that surrounded this Arizona team after having Caleb Love for a couple of years was who was going to be Arizona's go-to scorer when it needed a bucket. Koa Peat had star-like ability in that practice. I didn't expect him to get 30 in his first college game. But between his performance and Jaden Bradley dropping the 20-plus point game as he did at point guard, you saw an Arizona team that was uniquely situated to have a freshman like Koa Peat have a major impact, and I'm going to tell you why. Returning personnel, and you've heard me say it ad nauseum, is so much more important than incoming personnel in college basketball. Jaden Bradley is the guy that people look at in bold print, but there were three other players that were a part of Arizona's roster last year in addition to Jaden Bradley on a team that went to the Sweet 16 and lost to Duke. Jaden Bradley was one. Anthony Del Orso was another. Toby Awaka was a third. And Mo Krevish, who only played 8 games last year due to a foot injury, was the fourth. But that gave Arizona a foundation in place where it could allow Koa Peat, Braden Burries, Ivan Karchenkov, who had a terrific game last night for Arizona, Dwayne Aristode. It allowed those guys to be in a situation where they would have the veterans around them to flourish. We don't know what's going to happen moving forward for Arizona, but I'll tell you this much. Tommy Lloyd doesn't get enough credit for the way he pushes his team, a team that is obviously deeply situated in the desert on the West Coast or near the West Coast, to play a ruthless non-conference schedule. I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Arizona is going to go to Los Angeles a week from Friday to take on UCLA at Intuit Dome. Arizona is also going to be in a situation where it's going to play in November a road game at UConn. And then Arizona is going to host Auburn, who barely beat Bethune-Cookman last night, but obviously an opening night win that Stephen Pearl will never forget as head coach. Arizona is also going to play Alabama in Birmingham, and Arizona will play San Diego State and Phoenix in December. Those are 5 more high-level games that Tommy Lloyd is going to use to test his team. It looks a little bit different for Arizona, but if you look at the body of work for Tommy Lloyd since he became Arizona's head coach in 2021. In 2022, Arizona went to the second weekend, lost to Houston. 2023, there was obviously the disappointing loss to Princeton, but Arizona was a 2 seed. 2024, lost to Clemson in the Sweet 16. 2025, lost to Duke in the Sweet 16. That is 3 Sweet 16 appearances in 4 years. And Arizona, a team that was overlooked maybe in the Big 12, with Houston, who I'm going to get to later in this show, with BYU, who I'm going to get to later in the show, and with Texas Tech and Iowa State, as well as Kansas bringing in Darren Peterson, Arizona gets the best win we have seen one day in to the college basketball season against a Florida team that continues to reiterate the fact that it's finding itself in terms of its overall makeup. And that should not be a surprise. I was sitting years ago with a head coach at an AAU tournament, and he said to me, John, it's very tough to pick a team to win a league in the preseason if that team does not boast a returning guard. Florida's perimeter players from last year's team that won the national championship, Walter Clayton, gone. Will Richard, gone. Elijah Martin, gone. Denzel Aberdeen, he's transferred from Florida to Kentucky. Now, Florida didn't have the best guard play last night. from Xavier Lee and Boogie Flay and still had a chance to tie the game late. Got a huge night from its front court, as it will all season long. But this is something, again, that will allow Todd Golden to recalibrate his club. And Florida's going to have plenty of big non-conference games moving forward. Florida's going to have UConn in the Garden. Florida's going to play a neutral site game against the Miami team, who I think is better than people think in year one under Jay Lucas. Florida also goes out west to take on TCU, who lost the bye game last night to New Orleans in that San Diego tournament over Thanksgiving, and then either play Providence or Wisconsin. So for Florida, I know there's obviously the talk about trying to go back-to-back. Florida just needs to get the rhythm and the harmony right in its backcourt. But the story in Las Vegas from the first game is that Arizona makes a major statement. And it's not the only statement that Arizona has an opportunity to make. UCLA in 10 days, a road game at UConn. UConn is not expected to have Braylon Mullins for that game. And then, obviously, Auburn, Alabama, and San Diego State. Now, the second game of the doubleheader in Las Vegas between BYU and Villanova also did not disappoint. Now, BYU came in, and I've said it on this platform multiple times. BYU is entering, or has entered, the most anticipated season in the history of BYU's program. There's no denying that because of what A.J. Dybantsa brings. But we saw last night, and this is very similar to the parallel that I was drawing with Koa Peat, we saw last night what it means to have a veteran nucleus around a dynamic freshman. Richie Saunders, a player who averaged 22 points per game in the NCAA tournament last year, had a major part in that win over Villanova. Rob Wright, one of the more highly touted transfers in the portal during the offseason, had a major hand in that win over Villanova. And Kei Bakeda, who cleared out space late in the game for some of the players I'm referencing, also had a major hand in that win. It was a really good win for BYU because Villanova, and I said this after Villanova played Virginia in an exhibition game a couple weeks ago, Villanova looks like a different program under Kevin Willard. And I know there are no moral victories in sports, especially in college basketball, where every single game matters. Every single game matters, and Villanova had a big-time opportunity to really move the needle last night in Las Vegas. But watching Villanova on the road at Virginia and watching Villanova last night against BYU, you see the infrastructure in place to become an extremely competitive program in the Big East this season under Kevin Willard, without, obviously, a grace period. Now, people can say whatever they want about Villanova the last couple of years. This program is a blue blood caliber program. It was made into that under Jay Wright. Villanova has not played in the NCAA tournament since 2022. And judging by what I saw against Virginia and judging by what I saw last night against BYU, there's obviously holes in this roster, but Villanova has several pieces that I think are going to be prosperous this season. Was really impressed with Bryce Lindsey last night. The transfer from James Madison did not play against Virginia. Was really impressed with what I saw in the preseason with Malachi Palmer and Chris Jeffrey. Malachi Palmer transferred from Maryland, and then he obviously wound up with Kevin Willard of Villanova. Chris Jeffrey's another freshman. Devin Askew played last night. He's back sooner than expected from injury. But I think when you look at the totality of this and you look at Kevin Willard's body of work, made Seton Hall into a perennial NCAA tournament team in the Big East, took Maryland to the NCAA tournament and won a game in the NCAA tournament in 2 of his 3 seasons in College Park. Villanova, to me, is walking different, is talking different, is acting different under Kevin Willard. There is an organization, there is obviously a competitive level that I haven't seen at Villanova in a really, really long time. And I think Villanova is going to be a competitive team in the Big East. Now, in order to move the needle, and this is extremely important for programs in the Big East, because the Big East, and you've heard me say it for weeks now, feels like until somebody else is going to prove something, it's St. John's, UConn, and Creighton. How many bids? I'm not sure. The league was lucky to get 5 last year. But with all that said, I think you're going to see a situation where Villanova is going to be extremely competitive, and Villanova is going to have to do something with its non-conference games to elevate the rest of the league. Villanova still has an opportunity against Michigan. Villanova still has an opportunity against Wisconsin and Pitt. There are opportunities for Villanova to move the needle, and you can say the same thing about a program like Georgetown, who plays Maryland on Friday in College Park. And you can say the same thing about other programs, Providence, other programs not named, St. John's and UConn. It is really important for the Big East to have a good November and December.